Hello, and welcome to Gardener's World. Spring is slowly but surely rousing our gardens and stirring them into growth. We have an hour of celebration that will whet all our gardening appetites for the season to come. On today's program, Adam and Joe help a young couple revamp some unloved areas of their garden.
It's a bit like being at school, you want to pick teams.
It's not competition, Adam.
Is it not?
No.
Well,
you know,
it will be a competition.
We'll work into one.
Carol revels in the beauty and variety of salvias in high summer.
Not only do salvias bring vivid colour to the late days of autumn, but they also bring such an extensive range of colour. It's positively kaleidoscopic.
Cut flower grower Becky Crowley shares her top tips from her base at Chatsworth House.
As a cut flower grower, I grow tulips as annuals. So when we're harvesting them, what we do is we pull them from the bottom and hopefully the bulb comes out as well.
And I get a really good result from dahlias that I grew from seed. Look at that. That is a really nice dahlia. And they've been flowering like mad since early August. By mid-spring, the writing garden is frothing with flower, and everything is putting on surges of growth. I'm just tying in sweet peas in here. And you do need to just keep tying them up until the tendrils fully develop, and then they will entwine themselves on whatever you use to support them. And at this time of year, there is a real sense of summer just rolling in off the back of spring. And here in the writing garden, we've still got some cow parsley and these wonderful alliums, great bubbles of white flower, which the bees just love, and the silene. It is one of those plants that once it gets hold, which only takes about a year, it spreads like mad. But for the moment, I will forgive it all that for its sheer beauty and joy. Roses remain unchallenged as the nation's favourite summer flower. To discover more about some of our oldest varieties, Nick visited the walled garden at Mottisfont in Hampshire.
My career in horticulture, which began nearly 30 years ago, started on a rose nursery. And from there on, it's given me a lifelong passion for these incredible plants. The rose is certainly a vast and beautiful genus. The choice for your garden can be very confusing. Today, I'm looking at a class of roses which existed long before modern cultivars, the old roses. And these are best defined as the plants which were first identified before 1860. And some of them are truly ancient, dating back to the great palaces of Rome, Persia, and Egypt. The flowers became a symbol of love and beauty, and legend has it that Cleopatra scattered her boudoir floor with an inch deep of rose petals. Now, old roses have some pretty distinct characteristics. They tend to come in the pink, white and purple colour ranges. They're usually quite heavily scented, and the vast majority put on a spectacular display of flower early on in summer. One of the oldest groups of cultivated roses are the Gallicas, and this is a fantastic example. This is the apothecary's rose. It is Rosa Gallica var officinalis, and it's possibly the longest cultivated rose, and there's very good reason for that. It had historic medicinal uses, and the clue is in the name, officinalis. Old Greek pharmacies used to be called officinas, so plants that were used in a medicinal capacity in the past got that name. Now, as a garden plant, it's incredibly useful, not least that it can grow in partial shade, and it also does well in poor soils, which is quite unusual for a rose. Something I particularly love about it is, despite the fact that it's got these near double blooms, they are incredibly open, which means that pollinators can get to them very easily. The other lovely quality it has is this foliage, which has got a sort of dull, muted tone to it, which is a real difference from contemporary roses, which tend to be very glossy. Now, of course, there are other cultivars of Gallica that you can try. There's Versacolor, which is really dramatic with a pink and white stripe, and there are several other cultivars with red, pink and white tones. So overall, it's an incredibly useful garden plant that'll give you a burst of amazing colour early on in the summer. Roses are highly adaptable plants. In fact, there's a rose for almost every part of your garden. Crucially, all roses like to be kept well watered, and they're hungry plants, so they do like a regular feed. Grown in the Middle East since antiquity, the damask rose really is something special. The thing that makes it unique is that it has the most extraordinary and arguably the strongest scent of all the old roses. So strong, in fact, that it was used to make attar of roses, which of course is one of the scents that you get in Turkish delight. Now, it has particularly useful garden qualities. It makes about a 5-foot plant. It has a sort of dull muted leaf, similar to the Rosa gallica. But there are many different colour forms you can grow in the garden. There are pale pinks like this, near whites, and then darker pinks as well. This is called Quatre Saisons, and it's very unusual amongst the damask roses. Most of the damasks will flower just once at the start of the season. This fella is really special. He'll keep repeating all the way through the season, which to my mind means it's a great plant for modern gardens. The group of old roses probably most closely related to their hedgerow cousins are the albas. And what that means is that they have really good pest and disease resistance. And this is a great example of one. It's Queen of Denmark, and I love this plant. It has these lovely matte muted leaves with a slight bluey glaucous tone, so it really makes the flowers pop out from it. What's really special for me is the different stages that the flowers produce. So they start out as this delicate little bud, then they move to something that you could almost wear in a buttonhole, absolute perfection. Then they start to pop open, and then you wind up with these beautiful flat-faced flowers. Now this will grow to 4 or 5 feet, as most of the albas do. Gardeners are often cautious about introducing old roses onto their plots because they have a relatively short flowering window. But I think that fleeting perfection, coupled with incredible scent, means it's worth introducing just 1 or 2 old roses into your garden.
Well, I completely share Nick's passion for roses, because there is one rule of life that will never change, which is that nobody can have too many roses. And I love the climbers too, and the ramblers. This is wedding day, climbing up the apple tree. A classic rambling rose, and is filled with a mass of clusters of white and touched with yellow blossom. Last year, we wanted to share your gardening adventures at home, and we asked you to send in short films, and were bowled over by your response. Back in July, we received an inspiring film from Sharon Cook, who used her unplanned extended stay in the UK to create a stunning garden.
This is our rented home, and when we got here there was no garden whatsoever. So, came in March, was going to be here for 2 months because I was going back to Barbados, and then of course my flight got cancelled and cancelled again, and I'm still here. So I decided to create a cottage garden with the emphasis on wildlife. So we've got cornflowers, we've got nasturtiums, we have this fantastic Verbena bonariensis, which is a brilliant plant. It adds height without adding density. Butterflies and bees absolutely adore it. And we've actively planted tomatoes, 2 varieties, one called Amateur and the other one called Gardener's Delight. And Gardener's Delight is our favourite tomato. I might have planted a little bit too much because the idea was I was going to plant this year and it would be oomph next year. But I planted in March and we had so much heat in May, and then by June the garden had already gone oomph. Now I'm looking forward to getting back home in a few days.
Well, Sharon certainly proved that with a bit of hard work, you can be quickly rewarded with an incredibly beautiful garden. If you want to send your own film to us here at Gardener's World for the coming series, our website has all the details necessary, including some handy advice on how best to make your films. The sheer exuberant energy of spring flowering always amazes and delights me in equal measure. The garden has exploded. The colours have got much more intense, and the Camasias are still looking great. And what I've noticed about Camasias is that it takes a year or two for them to get going. By year 3, which is what these are, they really hit their stride. Creating your own garden is one of the most rewarding activities for both the body and mind. But it can also be a bit daunting, especially if it's your first garden. So when we received a request for help from a young couple who didn't know where to start, we knew exactly who to send.
When we take on a new house or a new garden, I think we can go one of 2 ways. We either get overexcited, we go into that garden, we cut things back, we dig things out. And doing that, you can really end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Or the other effect is we open the patio doors, everything feels overwhelming, and just get to understand that garden. Anyway, I've come here today just to meet... Anyway, I'll be back in a second, just bear with me, sorry. What are you doing here?
What are you doing here?
I'm here to do a garden.
So am I, yeah. Monty sent me.
What's he sent you for? You better come in.
So you need some help, don't you?
Does he think I can't cope or what?
Well, probably.
Seeing as Joe has turned up, we might as well make use of him. Nick and Ruth moved into their house with a 30-metre long garden a year ago, but haven't quite worked out what they want to do with it. Right, guys, you've now got 2 of us for a day, which is a nice surprise, I think. How can we help you?
There's lots of things towards the back that it's just all overgrown. Everything's just gone a bit mad.
I think it definitely needs some more colour in there. And for me, the terrace is such a great opportunity, but at the moment it's not looking very special at all.
Well, it's a bit like being at school, you want to pick teams.
It's not competition, Adam.
Is it not?
No.
Yeah,
Well, you know
it will be a
It
competition.
will work into one. I thought maybe me and Ruth just go and check out the end bit, shall we?
Brilliant.
And we'll leave you two to do whatever you've got to do.
Carry on.
Ah, what a view! But it does definitely fizzle out.
Yes, definitely.
There's not a lot going on here.
No, absolutely. And it'd be great to really make the most of this view and create a lovely space.
How do you want it to feel?
Potentially quite creative. I really love writing in my spare time. I have written a novel. Days like this, why not come down and do a little bit of writing?
And is there a particular style that you're looking for in this area?
Well, we're quite inspired by the Scandi theme, just to add a bit more of sort of modern tones and textures to it.
Well, with that in mind, the boundaries are the first thing we really need to tackle. And I've got some dark black stain with me. How do you feel about that?
Okay, very interesting.
I mean, it's quite daring, and some people might not go for it, but actually it can be incredibly effective.
While Joe is being creative with that paint, I'm going to take a look at another dark corner of the garden. It's an overgrown, shady spot that needs a little bit of attention. So, Nick, am I right in thinking you've got a little bit more than just a general interest in this gardening lark?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm an engineer by trade, but in my spare time, I'm actually studying my RHS qualification. So.
Fantastic. I mean, shady, dry shade is definitely one of the biggest problems that people have in gardens. So if we get in there, get stuck in, and I'll just chat through some ideas as we're going.
Super duper.
All right?
Yep.
Come on. If you look at what the shrubs are doing, especially that choice here at the front there, it's really looking for the light. Yeah, it wants more light than what it's getting. And you look above, the canopy's quite heavy, isn't it, in the Acer? But if you look really closely, there's some dead timber in there. So I would go up into this tree and really start to thin it out. That will let more light into here, and that'll help that choice here out.
Absolutely.
And then some of the other shrubs, people will just rip them out, but we could regenerate it. All you start to do is just actually find a little bud and just cut it hard back, and you'll end up with a decent shrub. All right?
Super.
And just another tip while we're here is just bringing in lighter colours. So if I grab this digitalis, instantly that'll give us height at the back of this border, but it will really lift the area, you know, so the white really pops in the dark space. So I'm going to leave you with that, because that'll keep you busy for the weekend, but we better go and get that back area done for you. That looks good, mate.
It looks all right, doesn't it?
Straight away, though, it feels totally different, doesn't it?
I know. Dug up a few slabs, and actually the soil's not too bad underneath. There's not loads of concrete or hardcore, so we could think about planting into this as well.
So if we get stuff laid out, work out where we want to put it, and then we can move it out of the way and start to lift the slabs.
Well, I'll do. I'll design it and you place it. How about that?
We'll start like that, shall we? We'll see how it goes. Go on then, you take your beloved boots. They are beautiful.
They're really nice. Right.
What are you thinking, mate?
Well, I'm thinking some sort of structure here.
Yeah.
It could be nicely clipped.
What, just in fours or something?
Yeah, fours would be good.
Yeah,
a bit more impactful.
Sorbus.
Yeah.
I reckon, I mean, that's a big beast, that eucalyptus.
Yeah.
If we could maybe just put something
Right on the edge.
right on the edge.
And also to give a bit of privacy.
Exactly, blocks that one out there, but also brings this tree down into the garden. And I think as well, this is quite exposed, this space.
Yeah.
So maybe if they do want a little bit of dappled shade, that would just provide it. And then maybe on that side, we keep that nice and open. Tied that back in, it's that fence.
Yeah,
Great for wildlife, fantastic flower.
Brilliant. Look at the greens already against the black.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's great, isn't it?
Get a couple more of these, I've got an idea.
Yeah, go on.
So what about we put two up on the higher level, two on the lower level, and create like a buttress holding it together?
I really like that. I'm glad I had that idea.
Yeah, I thought it might be yours.
It sort of will really break up the wall and sort of connect the two areas. And if it was nicely clipped, it'll give it that Scandi look. We are agreeing on things, Adam. Well, hang on, something's going to happen.
Not quite right, is it? It's not quite right.
The scent is just going to be contained within this space beautifully.
We'll catch up with Adam and Joe later in the programme and reveal the transformation to Nick and Ruth's garden. In early summer, I was developing some new flower beds of my own. It's all changed here on the Mound. We were looking at this the other day. I thought, it's not right, it's not quite working. And this is partly because the Paradise Garden now is a place to put a lot of the pots that were here, and partly because we never find ourselves sitting on this terrace. So I'm taking up all this paving, leaving the central path, and I shall be planting this up so that the garden spills down like the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. The following week, I was ready to start planting, keeping with the same colour theme as the rest of the Mound, which is pale yellows and pale blues, with touches of white. Now, I've got a range of plants, very exciting, and the first thing I've got is a rose. This is called Vanessa Bell, and it flowers with a lovely primrose yellow flower. and will keep flowering for most of the summer. Along with the shrub rows, I planted a range of herbaceous perennials and annuals. I wanted the planting to create an interwoven tapestry of pastel shades, and by July, I was able to see whether it had been successful. By and large, it's shaping up very nicely. Some things are looking fantastic. This Achillea Martina, along with the Rose Vanessa Bell, is a really good combination. And I like the way that the blues of the agapanthus and the lavender and even the purple of the thyme, which is really at its best and wonderful for bees, are picking up with the geranium, the nigella and the cornflowers. When planting any mixed border in your garden, most of us strive after a flow to the design where the plants mingle and grow as if they've planted themselves. However, a cutting garden has a whole different set of rules, because after all, the flowers are a crop to be harvested. And yet, a well-tended cutting garden can be very beautiful. We went to meet Becky Crowley at Chatsworth House in Derbyshire, where she oversaw the growing of a huge array of cut flowers for the house.
I used to come here with my family. I remember once just seeing this female gardener and just thinking, oh, I'd love that job. And I got the chance to come here to Chatsworth as a student and managed to get this job growing cut flowers. The cutting garden is a 1 acre site within a 3 acre kitchen garden at Chatsworth. I work with a team of florists, so the florists come here and cut all the flowers and they take them down to the private side of the house where the Duke and Duchess of Devonshire live. What the Duke and Duchess love is seasonality, so getting something that is really at its peak at that moment in time and having that to appreciate up close in the house is really special. To get as long a season as possible, it's really important to use lots of plants from lots of different plant groups. So I'll be using bulbs, including corms as well, hardy annuals, half-hardy annuals, biennials, perennials, shrubs. Annuals are fantastic for cutting because with many of them you can cut a stem and it reflowers. So if you've got a garden at home where you want flowers in the garden to look nice but also want to cut them for your house, I always recommend annuals because that's a great way of getting as many flowers in a smaller space as possible. As a cut flower grower, I grow tulips as annuals. So when we're harvesting them, what we do is we pull them from the bottom and hopefully the bulb comes out as well. And that gives you a really long stem. I've tried in the past to grow tulips as perennials, and what I've found is that the vast majority don't perform as well in second, third, fourth years. By far the most fashionable tulip at the moment is La Bella Poc. There's also a really beautiful one called Brownie that's a lovely double. And I'm trying a new one this year, another double called Amazing Grace, which I'm really happy with. To go with them, we've also got things like Ribes, Sanguinium and Camasias come in as well. So the glass houses are really important to get a long season. So we start with the anemones and then we go on to the ranunculus. The ranunculus asiaticus that we've got here are one of my absolute favourites. We plant them in the autumn and they flower really early in the year and they give us these really long stems as well. Once these are finished flowering, we'll take these out, store the corms and then replace them with chrysanthemums, which will flower right up until Christmas. These Icelandic poppies look really delicate, but by searing the ends of the stems in boiling water for about 20 seconds, they make a really good cut flower and last for ages. For people who want to grow their own cut flowers at home, things that I would recommend are things like cosmos, because you can cut cosmos repeatedly throughout the season and it just brings out more and more flowers. And you can grow those from just a packet of seeds or buy plug plants from the garden centre, and they'll still flower this year and look fantastic. Other things that are great are things like sweet peas as well, because again, you can just cut lots and lots of stems and you can train them up a trellis or a fence. So if you don't have much space, they're a really good option as well. So late spring is a really busy time in the garden. So sowing the last of the half-hardy annuals. I'll even start sowing a few biennials. I've been taking lots of cuttings of dahlias. The dahlias are a perfect example of a cut and come again flower, so they'll keep going right up until the frosts. I'm always trying to achieve this seamless kind of succession of flowers, and each year it feels like I get a little bit closer to that. I know that in the glass houses and the cold frames, we've got all those plants just waiting in the wings to be planted out, and that will take us right up until the frosts. And that's really exciting as well, to know what's coming next.
Now, I was interested to see that when Becky was picking tulips for cut flowers, she was taking it bulb and all. And that may seem very extravagant, but the fact is that tulips are at their very best in the first year. And they make a new bulb thereafter, and the new bulb is going to be much smaller, and the resulting flowers, if there are any, and quite often there aren't, will also be smaller. And if you're growing them in pots, the best bet is not to leave them in the pot. So what I do is use these either in borders or in long grass, and then buy new bulbs for a display next year. Now, the first thing to do is to break off the flower heads, and that will stop energy going into forming seed, so that what bulbs there will be as good as possible. So I need to extract them from the pot. There we go. They're coming. So if you take this and just put it straight in the pot like that, this now needs to go somewhere sunny. So the foliage and the stems can absorb as much light as possible and put the energy back into the bulb, and leave them until it's died right back. And then when it's completely died down, it can go somewhere dark and be stored until autumn. Now this leaves me with a really nice pot free to use for something else. And in fact, I shall be planting up my dahlias into the pots I had tulips, and once they're planted into the terracotta pot, it leaves me with a plastic pot to put the tulips in. So the whole thing has a nice circularity. Now, still to come on today's programme. Francis meets a man who has dedicated his entire allotment to his prize-winning blooms.
I went to a Dahlia show and the colour was amazing. When I seen the standard they was growing, I just walked away and said, I'll be back.
And Carol celebrates one of the late summer border's most glamorous flowers, salvias.
Not only do salvias bring vivid colour, in the low light of autumn, that colour really sings. You could almost say it dazzles.
But first, we're heading to London, and the garden of the DJ, musician and filmmaker Don Letts and his wife Grace, who have created their own special oasis in the heart of the city.
Hi, my name's Don, this is Grace.
And welcome to our little slice of paradise here in northwest London. Luckily, we've got a southeast-facing garden, perfectly positioned for sky views. During lockdown, we've really come to appreciate how lucky we are, although we've not been able to share it with anyone. So this little film is our way to remedy that.
We've been here for about 25 years, and during that time, the garden's been a constantly evolving palette. Other than the lawn, such as it is, one rose bush and a small cherry tree, everything here is us. And guided by Gardener's World, it's evolved into an eclectic mix that's all about culture clash. So, from the get-go, there's contrast. I mean, I'm Black British and work with music and film.
And I'm from the States and teach Pilates. And I guess the garden is where we come together.
Well, to a degree, as my punk rock attitude sometimes grates with Grace's more traditional approach.
And it's all reflected in the garden, albeit accidentally.
There's a juxtaposition of textures, colour, form and style, with one side of the garden favouring flowers and the other an assortment of ferns. And it's all peppered with cultural artefacts from our travels around the world. In amongst that, we've created spaces to sit and relax. And to complete the cast, there's Casper and Spook.
We've got small and delicate, we've got big and structural, and we've also got the BFG, the big friendly gunnera.
We got it as a baby in a pot, and it was probably the alien shapes it makes that caught our eye. But this is way before we read labels or tuned into the show.
Anyway, for whatever reason, it ended up where it is now, which is lucky because we had no idea it would grow to be humongous, nor that it's normally found near rivers and lakes. So keeping it satisfied is quite a task, but nevertheless, it's become a much-loved member of our family.
Maintenance-wise, besides water, it's occasionally fed with fish blood and bone meal, and in the winter it's cut back and mulched with its own leaves. And every year it comes back bigger and stronger. So much so we've taken to potting up bits and passing them on. You know, even before lockdown, the garden provided a much-needed retreat from our busy work schedule. And obviously, it's benefited from all the extra care and attention. But then again, we have too.
So if you're lucky enough to have a garden, take some time out to actually enjoy it, because at the end of the day, there's no better way to engage with nature and the planet. And if you don't have a garden, don't dismay. With a bit of imagination, you can create an alternate universe in a window box.
As for advice, well, everything we know comes from watching this show.
It worked for us, it'll work for you.
At this time of year, at Longmeadow, subtlety gives way to real intensity of colour, and none more intense than these agapanthus on the Mound. They'll last for a few weeks more, and at their best, they are radiant. By and large, there are two types of gardeners. Most of us are captivated by the range and diversity of as many different plants as we can squeeze into our gardens. But there are also a select group who become captivated by just one species or type of flower and become fabulously knowledgeable about them. Francis went to meet one such specialist whose love for his dahlias is all-consuming.
When it comes to allotments, anything goes. At first glance, it may look like there's little method, but what I love is that there is always plenty of madness, with growers experimenting all over the place. Here, I'm told there's one allotmenteer whose plot really stands out. Brian Carter is a self-confessed dahlia lover. He's dedicated his whole plot to his highly prized blooms, which he's grown to show in competitions. Brian, 40 years of competitions. Have you ever missed a year?
No way. No way.
So what got you into growing for shows?
I went to a Dahlia show and the colour was amazing. And I thought, we'll have a go at this. First year was a disaster.
Why?
I didn't know a great deal about them, but when I seen the standard they was growing, I just walked away and said, I'll be back. I started off with 25 plants. It snowballed up to something like 900.
Really? Wow. Well, I would love to find out what you need to do to grow prize-winning dahlias. Can I have a look?
Yes.
There are 14 classes of dahlia that can be shown in competition. But Brian likes a bit of razzmatazz, so he concentrates on pom-poms, cactus, decoratives, balls, and water lilies. But one thing's for sure, they must be in tip-top condition. So what are the judges looking for in an absolutely perfect flower?
It's got to be neat. Tight centre.
Okay.
That centre's gone. You can't show that, it's gone too far.
Okay.
So but you see how it goes back?
Okay.
Right to the stem.
So this one could potentially
Yeah,
get selected.
That's not out yet, but when it does open, it's...
Oh, wow, so that's too early, that's too late.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's got to be
Yeah.
absolutely perfect.
It's got to look like that Saturday morning about 10 o'clock when the judges go round.
The judges expect to see a specified number of each cultivar looking perfect. So with this mini decorative, for instance, Brian needs to find 10 identical flowers. But there's some flecks of yellow in this. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Bad thing.
Okay. And what about the size? Is that important?
Yes, it's got to go through the ring. See, that's gone over, but it's done.
What is this ring?
It's the National Dahlia Society approved ring, 115 mil.
And that's for a specific class of dahlia?
That's the miniature. Touches the ring, NIS, not a schedule.
Disqualified?
Yeah.
So why have they come up with this ring system?
Well, it was stopping people growing oversized. Bigger isn't better. All about quality.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's a giant deck.
Is there a ring for that one?
No.
Okay.
They don't make a ring that big.
It would be a hula hoop. Over the decades, Brian has won 128 national medals, so the stakes this year are high. This is impressive, isn't it?
The Mardi Gold, giant deck.
It's lovely as well with the dark-leafed foliage, isn't it? The flowers stand out really nicely with that different colour leaf.
Yeah.
So do you think you'll have 3 for Friday?
No.
OK, so maybe this one won't be going in.
No.
We'll move on then,
Too
shall
late.
we? So is this one that you're a bit happier with?
Yes, Canora Valentine, full-size bloom, nice centre. It's always in the first 3.
I can see why. What category is this one?
Large deck.
OK.
Wherever I go, I take my large decks.
Is that your favourite ones?
Yeah, that's perfect.
OK. Do you think you'll have 3 of these for the show?
I hope so.
Dahlias grow from tubers beneath the ground which store all of their nutrients. Now, over the years, those tubers will bulk up and you'll end up with a very bushy plant with lots of smaller flowers. But Brian doesn't want small flowers for his shows, so he has a nifty trick. He'll take cuttings from those tubers in the spring and grow a single stem, and then he'll pinch out any side shoots, nurturing just this flower at the top, which means he'll have much bigger and much more refined blooms. Before a competition, Brian marks the best flowers with canes. Then it's time to take the plunge and prepare them for their journey to the show. So you're taking a nice long stem?
Yep. Of course, it's at an angle, right? It's to take water.
Oh, I see. So because it will sit like this on the bottom,
That's right, yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then what's the next stage?
Cane. Put the cane.
And is that just to keep the stem really secure and sturdy?
Yeah. Right, it's ready for crating. Push the knife in, below the water line. That's bled now. It's full of air. If I bleed, it'll last all week. But if I don't, 2 hours' time, it'll just collapse. That is secure now.
You can take the bends as fast as you like now.
Oh, yeah.
Brian has dedicated so much of his life to growing dahlias, and I'd love to know what spurs him on. Are you here every day?
Yeah. I have to be coming out. I have to be growing my dahlias. I enjoy it that much. Keeps me out of trouble.
Do you have a holiday ever?
I'm on holiday. Do the housework before I come out.
I have to say, there aren't many allotment plots in the country that look better than yours. Absolutely stunning.
Now, these dahlias were almost rejects. This bed here is composed of plants that were either too small to plant out in the jewel garden, and we didn't think they would cope in the hurly-burly of the borders, or there were ones that we'd lost the label and we weren't quite sure what colour they would be. Well, all of them have done better than any in the jewel garden. They've absolutely loved it in these beds. And that's because they are grown in open space. They've got light, they've got air, they've been planted in rows quite widely apart in really rich, well-drained soil, and you can see they've romped away. So next year, I'm actually going to fill these beds just with dahlias. And these all came from tubers, but this little patch here is one packet of seeds called Bishop's Children. They're all offspring of the Bishop of Landa, sown in March, grown on and planted out. Now, they were planted out just to bulk up and maybe give us a few flowers at the end of the year, but these too have been flowering like mad since early August. Now, when you grow dahlias from seed, you don't quite know how they're all going to turn out, but one or two of them are really beautiful. Have a look at these here. Look at that. That is a really nice dahlia. I like the way the petals are spaced. I like the colour. It shows you that dahlias can and perhaps should be raised from seeds as well as tubers. However you choose to grow dahlias, do make room for them in your garden because they are beautiful plants. Another group of plants that ignite the late summer borders here at Longmeadow are salvias. Along with the dahlias and tithonias, they add a wonderfully exotic element to the jewel garden. And Carol went to Newby Hall in North Yorkshire to explore this vast and fascinating genus of plants.
As summer begins to ebb away and the birds take up their autumnal song, we all get used to the idea that our gardens are quietly going to sleep. Colours begin to mellow, everything softens, but there's one exception, and that is the salvias. It's as though they wait till this very moment to make an exhibition of themselves with gorgeous colour that fills the garden with joy and gaiety. The name salvia comes from the Latin word salvare, which means to feel well and healthy. Historically, salvia was used to treat numerous ailments, and it has strong antiseptic properties. Salvias belong to the family Lamiaceae. There are more than 900 different species, and of course there are many more cultivars. But probably the salvia that most of us are most familiar with is Salvia officinalis, the common sage. Salvias have a very clever way of getting pollinated. A bee comes in here. As it does, it pushes a lever at the back of a flower in its search for nectar. That lever brings down these anthers, and they're full of pollen. So the insect is dusted with that pollen. When it flies away, eventually it will come to a flower where the anthers no longer have pollen on them. But at that stage, the stigma of that flower, the female part, will have become receptive. So the pollen is deposited onto that stigma and pollination takes place. It's really, really important that these flowers don't pollinate themselves, because that way they'll become inbred. And the more diverse it is, the better for the evolution and strength of the plant. There are salvias from almost all over the world, but at this time of year, the majority of plants in full flower hail from the Americas. This is Salvia discolor. I love it. You see it from a distance and you're aware of every leaf being outlined in white. And then you get the real surprise. Inside is this beautiful dark flower. Outside a small Mexican town, botanists discovered naturally occurring hybrid salvias, spontaneous crosses between Salvia gregii and Salvia microphylla. The town was called Jame, thus the hybrids were named Salvia cross Jamensis. This is Salvia Jamensis Sierra San Antonio. It makes a short, bushy plant smothered in flowers of the most delectable peaches and cream colour. This is possibly the most popular salvia in the whole of salvia history. It's Salvia amistad, and no wonder people love it. It's got these dark bracts, and within them these rich purple flowers. It'll flower over a long period too, right the way through from midsummer until the frosts. And it's tall. Now, these plants were all produced this year from cuttings, and they're already nearly as tall as me. Salvias have to be amongst the easiest plants there are from which to take cuttings. You can do it at almost any time of year, providing you've got good green growth, and just cut under a leaf node. Or side shoots, which you can actually detach with a heel, and then straight to the potting bench, and we'll pot them up. So I've already got some lovely gritty mixture in here, because you want decent drainage. And then, first of all, I'm going to just neaten that heel, because if you leave it too long, it can cause your cutting to rot. Take off the bottom leaves, and then in here, just nip out that growing shoot. You can use anything to dibble them into this pot, so down to a decent depth. And then push them in so they're down to the base of those leaves. Usual thing with grit, it stops your cuttings rotting, it retains the moisture once these have been watered, and it'll help suppress any weeds. Water well once, which will settle the compost around the cuttings. Put it into a place out of direct sun, but with plenty of light, and keep it warm if you can. And eventually, after a few weeks, you'll see roots emerging there. At that stage, you can knock the whole thing out. You can pot them up individually, or you could take the 4 of those with their root ball and put it into a bigger pot. It couldn't be easier. Salvias are incredibly easy to cultivate. Their major requirement is sunshine. Water them really well and then let them go. Not only do salvias bring vivid colour to the late days of autumn, but they also bring such an extensive range of colour. It's positively kaleidoscopic, and what's more, in the low light of autumn, that colour really sings. You could almost say it dazzles.
This is Salvia dombia. It was given to me last year. And I grew it, but it didn't flower. Whereas this year, the flowers have started to appear, and it's been well worth the wait, because you have these magnificent, long, red tubes of petals emerging from a dark, sort of chocolatey calyx. In fact, it's said to be the largest salvia flower in cultivation. And the plant originates from high up in the mountains in Peru and Bolivia. And in the wild, it will reach 7 meters tall. Well, in cultivation, apparently, less than half that. But it's still a really statuesque salvia. It is tender, so in October, I'll dig it up, take it into the greenhouse, and then in spring, cut it right back, and it can start to regrow and be planted out after the last frost. But an absolutely fabulous plant. Earlier, we saw Adam and Joe visit Ruth and Nick in Leicestershire to help them transform their garden into a space that worked well for them. Now they've got the groundwork in, we rejoin them, just as they start with the planting.
Having decided on the overall design, it's time to lift the paving and dig out for the new planting areas. We're going to take out those pockets for planting, back to soil, and introduce topsoil with a lot of organic matter.
Nick and Ruth don't like the hedge at the back, which is messy and half dead. So we've decided to take it out to make the most of the view beyond.
You're right, you can keep going.
You'll go in a minute.
All right then.
All done. Did it feel Scandi to you, Ruth, all of this?
Well, I think it'll be a little bit Scandi when it all comes together.
And I'm thinking we've got to echo that time over there.
Oh, look at you,
see, look at
echo. I'll tell you what, working with you most of the day, it feels like there's an echo. You know, these Deschampsias are a grass I really love. They're a hard-working grass. I use them a lot at home. But they're there design-wise to really sort of create movement and pick up on what's going on behind me as that field grows and moves through the season. And around it, we can use these lovely little sort of dark sages. They work really well, and you pick up that scent from them. And again, they're not just sitting in one place, they're repeated all the way through the space.
Here you
In
are.
fact, you can dot them in. Look, there's a little gap there.
Lovely.
These beech will hang over and hide the wall once they've fully matured. I want to cut them into a crisp, modern cube shape. So we planted 6 of them, 2 at the top, 4 at the bottom, and now it's a case of picking a height, which I'm going to do by eye. We don't need to get the spirit level out on these, and just sort of running through them. And anything above that height, I'm going to snip off, and this is going to quickly bush out and make a really solid structure. And it's going to look fantastic. And the nice thing about beech, you get a wonderful fresh green in spring, and in the autumn you get those coppery tones coming through, which is going to work beautifully and really impose some geometry onto a garden like this to hold it together all year round.
Here you go, boss. Where do you want these?
Thank you very much. I'm going to start that one over there and just work them across the area. So
Sure.
Sometimes when you're putting plants together, not just isolating them, working them across the whole site, gives it quite a natural feel.
And then here we've got some, well, perennial plants that will just add lots of colour and interest through the summer. We've got foxgloves, 3 foxgloves there, which will just come up, and they're going to link to some of the foxgloves in the rest of the garden nicely. And this lovely thalictrum, this amazing deep purple stem And next to that, this allium, which looks great against that fence, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really pops out the colour.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So I think that's working really nicely. And then at the back, we're going to put in this climber, Trachelospermum jasminoides, but a sweet jasmine scent. And it will just fill this space with fragrance in the summer evening, which is beautiful. But it's also evergreen, but it's a well-behaved evergreen.
Fabulous.
This is a clementine, so have a incredible, isn't it? Smells really good.
It's brilliant, that does.
But I think as well, we won't just use them in this space. I think it'll be nice to just use them in the other pots as well.
Spread a bit of the scent.
Yeah.
So the thyme will just spread out and fill this space?
Yeah, just fill it nicely over the edges of the pavement. Look lovely.
Super, it's quite easy to maintain.
Yeah, definitely. We've created planting pockets, filled them with ornamental grasses, herbs, softened the boundaries with climbers and other plants. Put in beech hedges to add structure and help create that contemporary feel that they're after.
I've never really designed with anybody, or, you know, it's a...
You've enjoyed it though,
It's hard to do it by
You can see
committee.
that in your
I know, I've really enjoyed it. Well, actually, I think it's all about the results.
I would put a decent day's graft in, and I think it's given them exactly what they wanted, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it works really, really nicely, actually. I mean, just lifting a few slabs, painting a bit of trellis.
Planting picks up what's going on in the field out there.
Well, I think that this transformation, you know, and I think a lot of people wouldn't be bold enough to get rid of their boundary and their little block wall and just open it out to that view. I mean, and they're getting married, and I think this is a lovely wedding present for them, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
They look amazing, how they've been put together.
Yeah, they contrast really nice, actually.
We were incredibly lucky to not only have one Chelsea Flower Show winner, but two. They created an amazing design for us.
And they've taught us a lot as well.
Exactly.
And me especially.
Yeah. That view is just absolutely incredible.
I love it.
Since Adam and Joe's visit, Ruth and Nick have been in touch with photos of their new terrace, and they've obviously been taking plenty of time to enjoy it. The Paradise Garden at Longmeadow has developed over the last couple of years, and I have to say that I'm very happy with it. Not only does it look good, but it has the added bonus of being low maintenance. It hardly needs any gardening. It's really the easiest part of the garden to attend to. Everything just does its own thing quite happily. The pots need watering and feeding every week, but other than that, that's it. And as long as the mild weather continues, the verbena and the gara will go on flowering. And I may not do much gardening here, but I do spend quite a lot of time just quietly enjoying it. Let me just remind you to please do send us your own films of your garden via our website. But I'm afraid that is all we do have time for this week. However, we will be back with you in 2 weeks' time for another celebration of gardening. So until then, bye-bye.